I'll be honest, I've been working with ITIL for close to 20 years, mostly around the V3 and 2011 days, and I know all of those processes fairly well. Incident, change, problem, request, all the usual suspects. But if I'm honest, I've really struggled to get my head around ITIL V4. I've read the books, I've done the training, I've watched the videos, and every time I come away thinking, I don't actually see the difference. Now, incident management is still incident management, right? And when I talk to people across the industry, I hear the same thing. They'll say things like, we're still doing ITIL the V3 way, almost like they're confessing something, when in reality, they're probably doing ITIL V4 without necessarily realizing it. So in this video, I want to unpack that confusion. What's genuinely new in V4? What's just been rebranded? And how can you make sense of it if, like me, you've spent most of your career living comfortably in that V3 world? So let's start with what hasn't changed. Because despite what some of the ITIL V4 marketing material might suggest, the fundamentals haven't gone anywhere. Incident management is still about restoring service quickly. Problem management is still about finding and removing root cause. Change still manage risk. Request still gets users what they need. The mechanics haven't changed. The difference is how we think about those activities, who owns them, how they connect, and how they deliver value. Now, back in the V3 days, we lived inside that 5-stage life cycle, service strategy, design, transition, operation, and continual service improvement. It looks really neat on paper, but let's be honest, the real world was never that neat. Projects still in transition while the desk is still firefighting go live issues, changes happening whilst designs are still being tweaked. None of it ran in order, and let's be fair, that's perfectly normal. I think ITIL V4 has simply just recognised that reality. It dropped the life cycle and introduced the service value system and value streams, which, in plain English, means stop worrying about which box something sits in and focus on how value actually flows end to end. I think really V4 has finally caught up with how most of us were already working. Then there's the language change. And this is where I think a lot of people get tripped up. In V3, everything revolved around processes. What's it, 26 of them, each with their inputs, their outputs, roles, and flowcharts. Where, as we know, V4 talks more about practices instead. Now, that's not just a rebrand, really important. The idea is that a practice isn't just a process flow, it's the people, the tools, the governance, and again, really important, the culture that makes something work. So instead of saying, follow these 7 steps to manage an incident and you'll be good, ITIL V4 is more around, well, let's build the right environment. Let's build the right capability to handle incidents well. Much, much more about enablement. So let's put that into a real life scenario and we'll stick with incident management. So in the V3 world, we had the service desk, as we do today, logging and categorizing, prioritizing, assigning and ultimately closing the tickets. The incident manager had their eye solely on the progress of those tickets, made sure SLAs were met because that's where they were held accountable. It was all about that process flow. In V4, the goal's the same, restore service quickly, but there's a real subtle shift in ownership. The product or the platform team that owns a service is the one accountable for fixing it. The incident manager isn't there to do the fixing. They're there to make sure that the flow is happening, that incidents are moving, blockers are removed, and that comms are always clear. I describe it as like monitoring a conveyor belt. You're watching the flow of work, making sure that those packages keep moving and don't fall off. If the flow's smooth, the outcome is resolution, at the end of the belt. Your job isn't to handle every package yourself. It's to spot when something's about to jam, when something's about to go off the edge, and make sure that that doesn't happen and that things keep moving. Now, if your operation is already working like this, and I know many are, congratulations, you've been doing V4 for years. And let's take another example, change or change enablement as it's now called. Again, in V3, I saw plenty of organisations where the change manager was somehow accountable for whether a change succeeded or failed, which is ridiculous. They're not the one who designed it. They're not the one who built it. They're not the ones deploying it. Their role is to ensure good change practice, that the risk is understood, that the testing's done, that the approvals are with the right people and have been received back from the right people. They own the guide rails, not the outcome. The team making the change owns the outcome. And I think that's the essence of V4, pushing accountability to where the expertise lives. So, what's really new here then? Well, if you're running a sensible service management function aligned to product and platform teams, not much. ITIL V4 didn't reinvent service management. It's just reframed it around modern delivery models, utilizing agile, DevOps, product and platform ownership, and it gave language to what good organizations are simply already doing. You could think of it like V3 told you how to drive, V4 tells you how to teach everyone else to drive safely whilst you're keeping an eye out on the road ahead. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not to say that there's nothing useful in V4. Of course, there's use within there. It gives way more weight to continual improvement, collaboration, and super important co creation of value. It recognises that service management isn't just an IT thing anymore. It's how value flows across products, teams, and services across the enterprise, encompassing loads of different areas. But the core idea hasn't changed. Good service management is still about delivering outcomes for customers consistently, safely, and efficiently. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, we're still doing ITIL the old way, don't panic. If your service management team focuses on enabling delivery, setting those guide rails, maintaining governance, and improving over time, you're already doing V4. You just haven't stuck the new label on it yet. And if you're not there yet, if your world still revolves around those processes and only those processes, then the jump to ITIL V4 isn't about buying a new book. It's about recentering on value, on ownership, and that flow of work. So to wrap this up, here's my take. You don't transition from 3 to 4, you evolve into it. You keep what works, you change what doesn't, you stop worrying about which version you're doing and focus on whether your teams understand their purpose, know their guide rails, and deliver value to the people who rely on them. If you've been managing incidents like a flow rather than a checklist, if your change function enables rather than controls, acts like a bouncer on a nightclub door, and if your service management team acts as a guide rather than a gatekeeper, you're already in the V4 world. So maybe the difference isn't between 3 and 4. Maybe it's between those who read the book and who actually applied it properly years ago. That's it for today. If you've been struggling to make sense of 4, I hope this connects the dots. Let me know in the comments where your organisation sits. Are you still proudly flying that V3 flag or just quietly doing V4 without realising it? I've been Gareth at Switch It Off on again, and I'll see you next time.